Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Melbourne Athletic Development Podcast. Today, I'm very lucky to be joined by Brett Robinson. Brett, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
For our listeners, can you give us a little bit of a background about who you are and what you do?
So I'm the director of Viking Athletics. We're based on the Gold Coast and we specialise in speed and acceleration in sprint events, which whether it be surf life saving, professional athletics or athletics. More recently, we've moved into sort of more conditioning training for AFL players and NRL players from a more speed under fatigue point of view. And we're looking after around about 150 athletes a week now that range from grassroots right up to professional level. And as we speak today, I'm here in France in a holding camp waiting for the Olympics with one of my athletes, Ellie.
Yeah, you've had an extensive history, and I think it's kind of evolved over time, and it's been really cool to see. Obviously, you've now opened up your own facility, and you're sort of expanding some of those things. And one of the areas that I really wanted to talk to you about, not only in relation to that, but actually generally, was around the idea of athletic development. So it's a broad question, I know, but what is athletic development in your mind?
Yeah, I probably think athletic development is the holistic approach to preparing an athlete. For us, we would obviously be looking at trying to profile the athlete via testing or via physio screens and the like, work out what their strengths and weaknesses are in relation to their specific sports, and then trying to apply that holistically to an athlete to help them improve. That continues to evolve as things get better and worse inside the athlete. So it's something that needs to be sort of managed or kept up with, if you like. But it's something, it's such a big topic. But yeah, for me, it's just a holistic approach to understanding where an athlete's at in relation to their sport, and then programming around that and measuring to check your success.
I know you've mentioned in the past that you have a background in project management, how and planning, you've done a lot of big events, you've been involved in things like VM racing as well. So I know that you're in events planning, events management, but also, long-term planning. How was that experience translated to what you do with your coaching? Because I feel like there is a really natural connection there, and you seem to have a really strong planning understanding and ability to manage like long-term projects.
Yeah, absolutely. We like as a project manager, you probably first thing you understand is that you're not a specialist in sort of anything. So you go out and source the people that can help you, and over time we've done that. I've understood my weaknesses or an athlete's weakness, and then we've gone out and got the best physios, as in Josh Carter or Rick Martin in their strength and conditioning, or using facilities that are state of the art, testing equipment through Veiled, and we use all those resources to create an end product or a project, if you like. And in the event world, it might have been hosting the Guns N' Roses at Olympic Stadium in 2010, but now it's Ellie Beer, and with her, she's obviously a dual Olympian, or will be out to be a dual Olympian, and we recognised from a very young age that she was talented. She was very different to the other athletes that we had at the time and anyone else I'd seen, and we took our time with her, and probably over the first plan we wrote for her was nearly 5 years. We wrote a 5-year plan for her and where we wanted to be, which included she was 12 years old at the time, and which included her still continuing with other sports, and but probably the main thing from our side of things was keeping her interested, keeping her speed there. We didn't want to blunt the axe, and over each year we would add a 400 session to our program until close to the end of year 4, she would be on a full 400-meter program, and the other sports would start to take a back seat to athletics. And we were really grateful because we had some great coaches of Ellie that were doing OzTag. Matt Guy, who played for New South Wales and in the Melbourne Storm, premiership player, and he understood that Ellie was different as well, and him and I both bought into the idea that we had to allow her to be a kid, and then over time allow her to specialise. And for him, that was probably a very big pill to swallow, to take his star out of his touch and OzTag teams. But he did the what's best for Ellie approach, and and probably we don't see a lot of that where so many coaches now want the best athletes in their footy teams or whatever, regardless of the path that they're on. And so I think that was good. And we obviously had Ellie's parents, Megan and Greg, really bought into a long-term approach. I remember saying to Megan when Ellie was about, must have been 12 or 13, I was just like, we just got to pump the brakes on her training. She's already winning at the highest level that she could at Little A's or Nationals. And I was like, if she's winning by 30 metres now, we don't need her to win by 40 or 50. Like, that doesn't actually change. All it does is just burn her up now. And so they were very patient with the whole process, and they allowed us to do it. Probably after 2018, I think it was, we created a second plan for Ellie, which was a 4-year plan, which is a lot more specific, more data-based, more scientific-based. And, we basically just produced it like a project plan, we had a meeting with all the suppliers, which included, Josh Carter and Rick Martin, but then we also brought in the Queensland Academy of Sport, which is their dietitian, their psych, their phys, and anyone else that was needing to be involved. And we said, this is what we need to achieve as a group. Everyone bought in to, staying in their lane, but also contributing to this plan to get Ellie to the Paris Olympics.
There's so many things you brought up there, but the first one, and for those who are listening, we'll get onto Ellie, who at the moment is Australia's best 400-meter female sprinter. And there's a lot that we'll talk about with there. But the first question I want to ask is, obviously, you had the confidence to build long-term assessment plans and project plans. Was that something that going into you were confident was going to be something that you could implement? Like, the reason I say that is a lot of coaches now don't like to do longer term plans. They like to keep them shorter, whether they're in sort of 6 or 12-month cycles. But, you suggested you run concurrently, one after the other. You've run, a 5-year and then a 4-year. What gave you the confidence to do that? And did you, on the back of that, did you use a specific framework that came from project management, or was it more from the sports, performance world?
No, it was definitely probably more from the project management world. So we would just monitor and evaluate each of the steps. So the confidence came from, I suppose, just probably a little bit of the imposter syndrome, where I have to put it down on paper, understand what the path is, and then measure against the path of each of the milestones along the way. And if we weren't meeting the milestones, we'd be able to measure against that and determine why. And then, or if we were ticking the milestones or exceeding the milestones, we were able to track ahead of the program as well. And I think that's something that comes very natural to me. Look, I've definitely done it with other athletes along the way, and they haven't always bought in, or 4 years is a long time, or whatever the case may be. And lots of things can happen in that time that it just doesn't give you that linear projection that we all think development happens on. But yeah, it was probably more just I didn't take it from the sports performance world. Like I would argue that in our world that we're still unsure of, like, when I mean our world, the athletics world or the speed and development, like we're still unsure on what actually the right and perfect model is for any given athlete.
Yeah.
So it's hard to actually have anything out there to follow. So all we can really do is measure off what we wanted to do and then try to understand whether that's working or not.
Yeah. I think that like the nice thing about that is it's a simple formula, but it gives you some framework to go back to consistently. And I think as simple as it seems, it's often the most appropriate way to approach this kind of, long-term plan. Um, you've mentioned a number of times kind of the sequence that you go through. When it relates to athletic development, is that different to, particularly field or sprinting, whether, obviously you mentioned you coach sprinting on the beach and you coach sprinting on the track as well. When you develop those plans, are they different in those different domains, or if you're working with, say, a team sport athlete, or are they similar process, but, obviously the elements might change?
Across all the surfaces, like the surfaces that we operate on, it's all the same. But for team sports, it's very different. I'm not in control of any of the environments I'm in a team sport. I get given an athlete or a sample of athletes from a football club, and I basically work for them. They tell me what outcome they want with an athlete, and then we work through that process to get that athlete. And typically, you only get them for half an hour to an hour and a half a week, so you're very limited on what you can achieve. So we definitely have a baseline for those athletes, and we definitely have an end product, or we would take measurements along the way to see how they're tracking. But it's very, very different when you're dealing with the Gold Coast Suns or the Gold Coast Titans female team, that you just couldn't run a 4-year plan with those type of athletes. You're not in control of any of that. And, they almost want immediate success too in the AFL environment as well. Their business is winning.
How do you navigate
professional?
When you've got much shorter term targets? Do you have an approach that you use that you found effective when you're trying to meet those stakeholders a little bit sooner than what you do in a different environment?
Yeah, I think it's also like for me. It's probably important to be really transparent on what I think is achievable in the timeframes that I get. Just to set the expectation around, if they send me a football player or a midfielder and say we want him to be 0.3 faster in 4 weeks, I can't really achieve that without some sort of you couldn't achieve that with a track and field athlete. So you could almost guarantee it's not going to happen with a footballer unless they're significantly flawed. But so I try to set the expectations. I still give it a chance to work. We still work towards it, and I think some of the parameters we get given from football clubs aren't overly understood by the people providing it to us. That they just want their athlete to be faster, and they come up with a numerical number just to give us some sort of goal. But the reality is, I don't think it matters if Tuke Miller or Matt Rao run 295 for 30 metres or 305, but as long as they're showing speed and improvements, then I think that's all the clubs are after. It is very challenging, no doubt.
You mentioned there, and we'll get into it because our listeners do like getting into the weeds, the specifics of some of the stuff that you're doing with these players. What's your approach when you say someone comes from a football club or some sort of professional field sport and they say, okay, I need to improve my acceleration? What's your general approach to that? Because I'm sure it's a question you get asked all the time, and then there's small projects that I'm sure you're dealing with. Do you have a specific way in which you assess that and then start to implement things, or is it individual?
Well, it's definitely individual. We'd be filming an athlete, how they they typically come with a previous 20-meter speed time from the club. So you already have a baseline on what you're working on, and then you provide the basic. We would just start breaking down their basic mechanics, just like we would with a track and field athlete. In particular, if it's a field-based session. So I probably should point out we do 2 types of sessions. Then we'll do a field-based, which is acceleration, like 0 to 40, and then we'll do a curved treadmill session once a week, which is 30 minutes of like lactic threshold work to get them speed under fatigue and game ready, or game intensity ready. But so with the field sport or the field session, we would just break them down like a track and field angle, just like you would probably with any of your athletes, where you're looking at hill recovery height in the acceleration phase, force down, shin angles, leg drive, body posture, projection, all those little things that, these guys are, they're the top of their field, and, they're some of the best athletes they have in their country. But the reality is they haven't been taught a lot of this stuff. So there is easy ways to get gains, or they get gains quite easy out of the very simplest shin angles. Like, I reckon 9 out of 10 footballers what we work with will all land with their shin vertical off step 1 and step 2. And so they're projecting all their force vertically as opposed to horizontally. And, once you start to change that and try to, I suppose, via repetition, get them to increase their speed through that first 4 or 5 steps, they look like different athletes, and they feel better, they flow more, and they use a lot less energy. And that's probably one of the things that is very, very important in AFL, is that actually being fast without burning up a lot of juice, because they've got to be out there, they've got to cover, 13 to 17 kilometres a game. They might feel pretty good in the first 10 minutes, first 2 minutes. And then after that, their acceleration mechanics goes out the window. So we try to do a little bit under fatigue, and also, but I wouldn't say that we, probably the biggest challenge we have with that is that we don't get the repetitions in that we would with a track athlete. You get them for 35 minutes on a Monday, and you're supposed to achieve change in biomech, change in speed, change in force, all by not overexerting them with their allowable meters at above 85%. So, and that's quite challenging, because when you're doing a speed session, everything's above 85%, but the GPS will ping you if your football player's done too many meters, and then all of a sudden they drag from the session because their risk of injury has increased. So that's a significant challenge when when you and I go to a session, we've got 2 hours plus to deliver a speed session. When you've got to deliver all that, probably a little bit more, in 30 minutes, 35 minutes.
You mentioned they're trying to, get repetitions in. Is there other ways that you approach that? A big area obviously in athletic development, skill development, and generally strength-based approach. Are there any tools that you use to try and really reinforce some of the sort of technical things?
Yeah.
Like what are some of the tips you can give people that they can use as part of that sort of learning?
Yeah. Yeah. So with both track and field athletes, we have a pretty heavy use of sled. We work on getting the sled up to about 50% of the body weight over 20 meters, and I think that just allows the athlete to be in a deeper projection than they normally would, and that provides pretty good repetition. I also really like wickets, so the small hurdles as well. Yeah. That provides that reduction in casting, but it's not as good for acceleration. It's just better for upright running. So yeah, I'd probably more lean into sled work to improve acceleration and all the mechanics. Very clunky when you're doing in a group setting, but if you can break it down into smaller groups, or you have more equipment, but there are other things, the elastic bands that are pretty good in that environment when you've got 44 men. And we did a almost train the trainers approach, where we did a session or two before the season started with the performance coaches, and a lot of the running drills or the warm up that we would do in the track and field or a specific environment have been implemented into the football football training warm up as well. So, it's not totally reliant, and then there's a bit of repetition across their week when doing all the activities, and we microdose the plyometrics through the gym, through the warm up, and through their game sim as well. So just trying to microdose it all over the place, so they get a significant amount of content in a week without trying to all achieve it in 30 minutes.
Do you think that's something that you're noticing working with some of these teams that can be really effective, given that they have so many competing training items? It seems like whenever I talk to people from, say, sporting teams who are in their performance staff, they would say, like, we would love to do more of this, but we physically just don't have time. And then it becomes a priority issue. Okay, are we going to make more speed work, or are we going to do more skills training? It doesn't matter who you are, it's always going to lean on that when it comes to field sport. So you feel like that, and I don't know whether, I think the term is newer, but it's been around forever. This idea of doing small interval training and everything. Do you think that's a way around for these people who do work in team sports?
Yeah, probably yes. I'm a big believer in microdosing, or providing small elements of learning skills across the whole week. I probably also have the opinion that we come out of track and field world, and I know that these athletes are working probably a lot harder than football players, and in particular, like the Nutrigrain Iron athletes that we have. They're working 17 sessions a week, and that might be 3 times more than an elite AFL player. So it will come down very much based on what the head coach would want in that environment, and if the head coach feels like he's comfortable with where any athletes are at, then they need to work on their gameplays or their skills or the strategies, then absolutely that gets priority. At the end of the day, where we all work for a football club or a head coach or whatever, and ultimately they get to make the decision on all those things. If I said hand on heart what should be done, I was like, there's probably capacity to do more, to be fair. And I think that there's real, an athlete or field sport athlete could probably find another hour in their week to do a session to improve their speed or improve their agility or improve their plyometric or their power or their strength. I think that they could do more based on what we see with the high-end endurance athletes. So, they're all very different sports, and, we rely heavily on those that are exposed to it and have been exposed to it for many years with their experience. But I've always, I always had the belief that, probably another hour in the week is probably achievable, but the risk versus reward will probably lend a high performance manager to err on the side of caution, as opposed to risk doing that extra session and then being exposed that, hey, you did too much.
It's interesting you say that, because it's something that I've noticed quite a bit talking with these people compared to, say, people who are in a position like ourselves where we are in control of the whole program. And the consequences, they are big, obviously, but they're different. And I feel like people who, and I guess this is, some people might be critical of this viewpoint, but I feel like there's a lot more conservatism in some of these team sport performance staff, because the players are getting paid a lot of money, and the consequences of them not playing is, can be quite dire, particularly in a financially kind of driven sport environment. And so, as you said, they're often a little bit more conservative, and they risk, but they're not necessarily willing to take it. Whereas I think in some ways we're lucky. 1, we don't probably have to answer to too many people. But 2, we're looking for the absolute nth degree of performance. And so if you have to take what is a known educated risk, often you're going to take it because you're looking for that really, really pointed.
Yeah. Oh, that's. I think you summed it up perfectly. There's no question that in an environment where you control yourself, you have a holistic view of the whole the whole athlete's week, where performance staff probably don't, because they might not see every single session. And certainly with us, if they're in our studio as opposed to a field session, they might not get any data from that. There's no real tangible, this is what the athlete did, or this is what so yeah, there's no doubt. Like, I've had probably athletes that, like field-based athletes, where a performance manager will just go as hard as you like. The guy's probably not going to get to that, like, get an AFL game for a while, so because he needs to improve so much, to just go as hard, squeeze as much out of them as you can, so we can get them AFL ready. Where another player, they might say, just cool your jets with this bloke. Like, we can't afford him to be hurt, and I think they've used the term, you've got to break a few eggs to make an omelette type thing. And athlete A might get that, but athlete B is just like, yeah, no one, there's no eggs being broken with this guy. And I'm probably subconsciously doing it as well, because I really like the teams that I work with, and I have great relationship with all the staff. And the last thing you want anyone to get hurt, in particular, a $1 million player.
Yeah.
So I subconsciously probably err on the side of caution too. If there's any level of doubt, I probably like teeter in the side of, well, let's just go a little bit easier so you get through the day. And ultimately, it's not my fault if you get hurt later on down the road. So
yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's okay with you. We might sort of like shift a little bit, because I want to get into your knowledge on the technical aspects of running. It does relate to that. So, do you see the technicalities of what you do in field sports being very similar to what happens in athletes, or even and speed sprinting as well? But are the technical aspects of the running the same, or do you think there are variations that you need to manipulate when someone's playing their field sport?
I think technically they're the same. Like, I think AFL players, and I keep saying AFL because that's the predominant, whether the academy or actually at the AFL level, they typically run poorly with like slow ground contact, long heel recovery, or high heel recovery. They're probably using too much quad, not enough hip flexion. They more often than not tilt too far forward. And I've yet to see an AFL player come to us that does have any level of dorsiflexion in flight or in landing. So
what do you think? What do you think drives it? Because I have seen the same thing. Why do you think that they have such little awareness of dorsiflexion control? And do you think it's an underlying physical characteristic problem, or do you think it's actually they haven't been taught the skill?
I think it's the latter. They haven't been taught the skill. We all went through primary school, and how many times were you taught to run on your toes? And I think that subsequently becomes a bias that when you're on your toes, you're up like a ballerina, being taught through primary school and high school, like a PE teacher, or, the guy down the little athletics club that's volunteered his time. They're all, you all run on your toes, but I think the bias ends up being more plantar flexion than dorsiflexion. And then, then there's suckers like us that have to fix that in a later stage, when they've got 18 years of, motor mechanics that you've, or biomechanics that you've got to sort of unravel very quickly. So, so I definitely think those things are all the same. And we're fixing those things across all sports, all codes, all type of athletes. I don't think AFL players run differently to track athletes. Yes, they spend less time in the sprint posture, but they accelerate the same. They should be hitting the ground the same. And if their heel recovery is fast, generally they move from contest to contest a lot faster as well. So doing that under fatigue is a lot different to what a track athlete experiences. So, that's probably the next iteration of what I need to achieve with these guys.
Mm. In terms of the model that you do use, do you have, a specific model that you lean towards? There's obviously a few different, these days there's a few different streams, I think, that are popularized. They have various influences from different parts of the world or different coaching trees. Do you have a model that you kind of have used, adapted, or gained a lot of information from?
Yeah, I probably I've probably bastardized my program off a lot of
And we
different
all have.
coaches. Yeah, we've all stolen parts of it from everywhere and then applied our own bias based on what's worked in our own environment. Definitely, I definitely have a front mechanic bias. I really like to exaggerate the teaching of that and forcing that. I like the idea of the pelvis sitting in a neutral position and
What do you think influenced that the most? Is that being more empirical in nature, or is that being, a model that you have, spoken with other coaches about or seen and then tried to implement?
I I think I was dealing a lot with well, I wasn't dealing with Clyde Hart. I followed Clyde's Hart program a lot early days, but I was probably influenced by the Altus model for a while, the Dan Faths of the world, and he's very focused on a front mechanic model, and so probably when I was learning my craft, I probably leaned into that a little bit, and now it totally makes sense to me that's the really only way to run. Like the short heel recovery, fast or high knee position into a really high strike into the ground is probably the only way to go if you want to generate a lot of force in a fast way. And I know that that's not right. I know that other people do it differently, but for me, that's my bias, and I love the idea, as a total training model that the aerobic system is worked quite a bit as well for the sprinters. I know AFL and the Nutrigrain athletes are all, yes, they're an aerobic based sport, but we're an anaerobic based sport. But everything that we've done over time that is aerobic and is done, like there's an element of like an aerobic system session in the week, which is quite extreme. And, in our environment, it might be 10-200s, and we always end up with a good result in our short sprinters as well. And I don't, if I said hand on heart, the 10-200s doesn't make you faster, probably not. But does it make you more resilient for the heavy training loads and the down forces? Does it give you the capacity to recover faster during a session? Does it get you more efficient in the way your foot uses the ground or hits the ground and rolls over it? I believe so. So there's all these little things that I probably have a bias or a model in how I program, but it might not be for everyone. And we absolutely run a concurrent program where we're speed work day one and aerobic or aerobic endurance in week one as well. So it's literally all year round, and just the volumes and the intensities and the recoveries are all the things that fluctuate. So I've tried short to long, I've tried long to short. Concurrent is where I've been at since about 2017, and I don't think it's any coincidence that shifting to a concurrent model suits my style of coaching a lot better. But also when we started to have athletes represent Australia in the open teams as well was around the same time. Just a little bit more control over the athlete.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to say that, and we obviously spoke about this the other day, of the difference even in generations of athletes and how robust they are. So it's interesting to say that you feel like it builds a little bit more of that background for injury resilience by doing things that, as I said, 200s or the training that actually means being more fit. And I feel like there was and is still probably elements of our community who are, they want to do only things that are so specific to that path. Potentially they're missing out on some of those broad applications. I remember talking to early on in our podcast, we did a conversation with Dr. Brady Green, talking about calf injuries, PhDs, and we say, this idea that often with the calf, obviously the rehab process, you're trying to give it some of the features that it has. And, we know that the calf and soleus are being heavily heavily under stress when you're running, for instance, many multiples of body weight. But he says, like he'll often implement things like jogging because it starts to build some of the tissue capacity that he wants in both the muscle tissue and the tendon. And you're starting to create, a stronger structural integrity. And I think that sometimes the more specific you get, no, it's not transferring to the specific performance, but it's giving you more of that tissue quality, more of that tissue density that you can't get unless you've kind of done some of those activities. And I know that in our discussion, we kind of went around this idea of it actually seems to be a little bit harder now to throw people into these, high volume concurrent programs from the start. You have to titrate your way in because they just don't come ready to deal with this. They're not. And I don't want to be those people who say, for generations are better, worse, or indifferent. But it's just the reality that people maybe haven't done much general physical activity. They've done way more sport, but they're not running around and riding a bike and jumping out of trees and swimming and doing all of these things that we probably were exposed to through general adolescence and childhood.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think it's also got a little bit to do with the churn and burn nature of our society now, that people want a result really fast? So, running, we both know that you can probably go from 0 to top speed within 6 weeks, or you can show improvement in speed in top weeks, but you plateau really fast after that. Where a more periodized program, whether it be 26 weeks or 48 weeks, that you can probably get the peak or the top speed and the acceleration's all a lot faster and a lot better if you're just a little bit more patient. And it's probably easy to default as an athlete or a coach to go, let's do something really fast, let's get some tangible things in place, and then we feel like we're coaching, and then what I've seen, people struggle to work out why they can't progress after the first 10 weeks. How many athletes come to you and go, oh, well, with Coach X, and we no longer, we weren't going anywhere, we weren't improving, so we moved on. It's like, well, it's because you were always after, and hearing about what they were doing, they were always just after the short fix and the quick tangible results.
Yeah, the concept, and we have spoken about this on the podcast before, but this concept sort of became really apparent to me, that you've got to keep applying stress to the system, and you've got to keep expanding someone's capability to deal with training stress over time. Now, obviously, if you just throw all the eggs at the wall, then most people break. So the way you have to do that is exactly what you said. You need to graduate that progressively, and obviously that's an underlying principle of exercise prescription, progressive overload. So it's not common for people to know that, but it seems to have gone in, as you said, because people's almost attention spans are too short. They don't want to say, it took me 40 weeks to get to the point where I was ready to do, an 8-week racing. I'd rather say 6 weeks, and I was able to do that. So it doesn't mean that you only have one opportunity to say compete through that cycle, but you need to be aware of how do I keep building on each of those features throughout all of that, which I think can be difficult to do, particularly for athletes who, as you said, want a result yesterday.
Yeah, correct.
What I want to do is I do want to ask you a little bit about 400 meter coaching, because, as you said, you're in a very fortunate position to be preparing for the Olympics over 400 meters. What are some of the specifics about coaching 400 meters that you see as part of the the overall preparation? And do you have a specific way in which you approach the 400 meters, I know that we've spoken about it, so I'm sure you can give us some insight about how that's developed over time in your coaching journey.
Yeah. Well, I won't lead with Ellie, because Ellie's probably a different cat. But so I started coaching 400s maybe 2016. with an athlete, Murray Goodwin, who ended up going on to win the Commonwealth Games. The first program I wrote for Murray was based on what I thought, which is largely I just had no real idea, and I just doubled what the 200 guys were doing basically, and similar principle. We're just making strong and fit and all those things. And look, he was amazing. We had two guys in the squad, and they were in separate semis at nationals. They both led into the 300, and they both finished fifth in their semis. So just the tank was empty by the time they hit 300. So we did a little bit of soul searching after that season, and spoke to a lot of coaches and mentors, and looked overseas, and probably realised we're doing a lot less than everybody else, nearly half of what everyone else was doing. So we progressively increased the volume of Murray and TJ's program back then. Murray was a very endurance-based athlete. He had natural speed, but he was more 4'8". When he was a kid, he was, I think, national champion in high school, or early high schools or whatever. So he had an aerobic base that was natural to him, and all we were doing was just feeding that without feeding the other thing. And I think it was 2018, he ended up winning, and we had this very specific base model that had him running 98% to the 100-meter point, flying down the back straight in I think it was about 10:60 into a 11:0, and then hopefully finishing off the last 100. And we just trained that model once a week, every week. So it was just like we were rehearsing all the time. We're very big on 400-meter pace rehearsal, and it's probably something that they do from about week 12 in a 48-week cycle. So we understand. We give them a spreadsheet. Here's your numbers that you've all got to meet. And I can't say that didn't work, but probably in that process of doing that with Murray, we probably didn't do enough speed. We probably leaned too much into his strength, and then cost him a bit of speed, so he wasn't able to sit in that speed reserve well enough. So he was like, I think he was about a 21.3 guy, and was sending through in like 21.8, and he was just burning as he was coming home, but he had just enough more than everybody else. Like, I don't know that his last 100 was all that impressive, but it was better than everybody else's, so we were able to hang on. And we kind of rolled the same model out with Ellie. Ellie was 15 when Murray won his national championship at 31. So, and we thought we had the formula; it was just going to work for everybody. And Ellie, as we sort of mentioned earlier, is sort of on that climb. And when she made the national final at 15 on the same night as Murray won, she still hadn't done a full 400-meter program yet. Like, she still wasn't working the 4 sessions a week on the 400 work. So we knew that this chick was just going to boom. So we just rolled out what Murray was doing, and it worked okay for a while. And it might have been what you're talking about before, where that because we were increasing annually, the stimulus to new stress was helping her develop, and she was consistently improving. And we ran a PB early. I think I can't remember if she was 16 or something. Like, she ran a 52.5, and we thought it was all just going to happen. And her head just couldn't cope with it. The maturity wasn't there, and just struggled. And we probably made some mistakes around that PB as well. Like, we manipulated the lane draw at a track classic and said we want to be inside Lauren Bowden, who is just the most consistent runner, beautiful, really even run. Like, I think a 11 or 12-time national champion in the 4 hurdles. Like, we knew that she was going to run evenly, and so our whole race plan that night was just Ellie follow Loz until you get to 250, and then go for it after that. And she ran that PB, and it was epic. But I'll look back in reflection now and going, we actually didn't teach Ellie anything through that run, we actually probably dented her confidence moving forward, because guess what? Lauren's not going to be in the outside lane of you every time you run. And in fact, it was never ever again. So we struggled. So we persevered with that program, and our beautiful Excel spreadsheet that said that Ellie was going to run. We thought we had it all worked out. My project plan was going beautifully, and it was just too much for her. Like, she just struggled with the idea of running to a model. She never really sensed or felt what each of those rhythms felt like. She was just still a kid at heart. She just wanted to run fast and do things, and didn't want to be strategic and sit at a number. But then, so we plateaued. Like, literally, her training was okay. Her training was quite good. But when she went out to run this model, she'd stress out about the numbers and percentages and blah, blah. And that was probably a shortcoming of mine. And this year we just and this is why I left with Ellie to last, because it's really, really boring. It's like Ellie, run hard to 3 and then hang on, like, that's it. Like, just do a time trial to 3 and then just hang on down the home straight. And yes, we do all the work, or we do all the speed endurance work that says, like, she does a lot of work under fatigue, trying to run a sub 14 last 100. So a lot of her sessions, we get her to a point of fatigue, and then she's trying to run a sub 14 last 100, which hopefully one day will give her a 50 point something, And so we're now working on the model that we know Ellie can get round to 3. And I should point out, we probably did a lot more speed with Ellie this year to get her speed up so she could sit in the speed reserve. And that's worked okay. But there's times where she just runs faster, like, she's now just like, we want her to come through in 24.5 through the 2. At National, she went through in 23.6, which is her PB for 200. So she's just absolutely murdering so she's just starting to run faster, which is probably okay, because she's less stressed and she's enjoying running a lot more. She knows her job when she's out there. So we allow her just to run hard. And then my job is to just make her strong and fit enough to hang on in that last 100. And, which is kind of what we're seeing. So we do a week with Ellie would typically be activation on a Monday.
What's an activation?
Speed. Oh, just
is that running?
Just a long warm up, and then it'd be 660s or 480s or something at 75 to 80% in like a technical model, like that upright sprint posture, making sure that she's feeling comfortable and we can assess where she's at. Fires up the neural system a little bit, and then the following day is a speed session where typically consists of 260s, a 150, and then a hard 300 this time of year. But it's always going to be the speed session. It's not always the same session, not always the same distance, depending on what we're doing. Maybe in the depths of winter, you might see that they're 480s, but by the time you get to January, it's 260s, a 150 and a 300. And then Thursday is always our race model day, which is either 200 with a 30-second recovery, or a 300 with a 30-second recovery, all run at the race pace or in the last 100 better than the race pace. So it's always that model. And Saturday will be more hills in the winter, moving into like split 300s where we're getting her fatigued and she's running that sub 14 second on repetition, which we found quite effective. They're all simple sessions for Ellie, because we've tried to overcomplicate it in the past and that hasn't worked. And now I think she enjoys running a lot more now, because she's very clear on what her job is. And this year we've had a lot of great support. Like we moved into doing altitude training in the QAS, and we feel like that's given us a little bit of an edge as well. And there are things that we wouldn't normally do.
She does a curve trip. What were you kind of think like, particularly in maybe for elephants, we don't really understand 400. Why would something like altitude training be valuable for a 400 meter run?
I think it's just their ability to deal with lactic in that last 100. It's your 400-meter race is very different if you're running 15 seconds for the last 100 as opposed to 13.8. And I know that's just a simple form, like sounds pretty simple, but the reality is the fitter she is, the better she can deal with that lactic. The more oxygen she has in the body, so the faster she's going to run, the more comfortable she's going to feel in that last 100. We know she's going to get to 300 fine, or 250 or wherever. It's just when she starts to sort of burn up, entering the atmosphere, then she's got to be able to deal with that in that last 100. So we spent a lot of time, and that was, it wasn't my idea. The QAS sort of recommended that we give this a shot, and I would say probably physically it helped. I'd say mentally it helped a lot too, because those sessions were really, really hard, really taxing, and she got used to the idea of being really uncomfortable under fatigue and then still having to operate, which is probably an element of where she's at now with her confidence, that she just I wouldn't say she loves the pain, but certainly she can function in a significant amount of fatigue now, where 2 years ago that was probably a problem for her.
Do you think that the being able to deal with that level of discomfort is related to a sort of personality profile? I think 400-meter runners and even maybe 400 hurdles and 800-meter runners, they seem to not mind being in a fair bit of discomfort. Do you think that's something that naturally comes, or is it something you can develop?
I definitely think we can develop it, because we have developed it with Ellie, and so yeah, I know Ellie. Like, Ellie is, like, she's 21 years old now. Like, she's probably had more personal growth in the last 12 months than ever before. She presents herself more as an international athlete now than she did in the past, and where prior to that, I don't think she had a great appetite for fatigue and lactic unless she was leading. If she wasn't leading, then she probably wouldn't be overly interested in trying to fight that, or she would fight it too hard and end up in a negative spot. But I think it is absolutely developed, but you have to develop it slowly, because you just you become very unpopular when you start setting sessions that are way beyond people's capabilities.
You mentioned the idea of national or international level athletes, and as a coach, I think you're now in this space where you're navigating that gap between international representation, which you have a few athletes reach successfully, but then I know that you aspire for your athletes to be able to be making international finals. Yeah. How do you see the process of closing that gap, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think you got to start it early, because, and it probably is a little bit personality driven as well, that some people are just competitors and other people aren't. Are just talented at their sport, and I believe that making Olympic Games or a national team is absolutely incredibly, like, huge achievement, something I could never do, and it's something that does absolutely need to be recognised. But you're going to race, you're going to compete, and you've got to compete hard. So with Ellie, because this was a second Olympics, it was a little bit easier, because we kind of knew early on that Ellie was probably going to qualify through the points ranking system, that we could start having chats to her about going, we're not going to the Olympics to participate. We're going to, run a personal best, and her goals were always structured around, I want to run a personal best at the Olympics, and that is absolutely the mentality I want her and any of my athletes to have, or anyone involved in our space, is that getting the Australian and the coat of armour and the Olympic rings on your chest is not the end game here. Yes, it's an achievement, but we want to be successful as well when we're here. We'll definitely enjoy ourselves more if we're running really well. So, and I know with, we'll keep reverting to Ellie because she's the current piece of conversation, but I know in World Juniors that she probably underperformed in her own words, because after she made the final, she switched off. She felt comfortable and, didn't do a nutrition that night, didn't do a recovery after the semi-final, went to bed a lot later. There was a level of satisfaction, let's call it, on achieving a top 8 position in the world, where the Ellie that raced the semi, or the Ellie that raced the heat, or the Ellie that was trying to qualify for World Juniors wasn't there. That hungry Ellie had just gone, okay, it's okay, I'm cool now. And we recognised it in chat. We tried to arrest it. Didn't happen. This time around, we're way ahead of that now, where we're just not. I don't feel like we're here to participate anymore. Like I'm not going to say Ellie's going to win the Olympic gold, but if she runs a personal best next week or the week after, I feel a level of satisfaction that we're on the right path for her to eventually beat that. And there's also probably, and something that my generation didn't deal with. And again, I wasn't a national athlete in athletics. I wasn't surf lifesaving, but there wasn't a level of applause and a level of, I suppose, pats on the back that back then in the early 2000s that these guys get now. Like, they post up, that they've made a Commonwealth Games team or a Olympic team or a World Championship team, and then it's just the world floods with support, and there's a lot of self satisfaction that goes into that, and I don't know the quite term, but it's almost like they switch off because I feel good, and there's nothing we can really do about that, but it is a challenge for coaches to deal with when the athletes are getting patted on the back and celebrated like they've won the Olympics by qualifying, or whatever level of sport that they're at. We're very quick to probably over celebrate things that we expect anyway. We expected Murray to make the Comp Games. We expected Ellie to make the Olympics this time around, and it was no shock to anyone that either of those two things happened. But yet, the amount of the enormity of that happening and the support that came in was just ridiculous. It's almost overwhelming for everybody. So I think that has a part to do with where we're at as a sporting community at the moment too, is just not seeking that adulation early. Like, have it, enjoy it, absolutely, you achieved, but don't read your own press. Don't drink your own bathwater, as someone once said to me. Just get on with it after you have those moments. You've got to have those moments; they're important, but don't think that that's the end game.
Brett, thank you so much for your time. It's been enormously insightful. We really appreciate it. So thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having us.
To all our listeners, if you've enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe to all of our social media channels. And obviously, if you want to know anything about Brett, you're on the Gold Coast and you're after services, Viking Athletics is where you will find him. He's got a really great social media platform and website if you need to take any information in or seek out his services. So thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers, mate. Bye.